There are some pretty major changes coming to the real estate industry right here in Kansas City starting in August of 2024. Hey, I'm Rachel.Kilmer. I'm a licensed real estate agent on both sides of the state line, and I'm here to walk you through what is happening, what you can do about it, and what to expect moving forward. And stay till the end when I'll give you a few tips on how to navigate around this to give yourself the best home buying experience possible. Let's dive in. So you've probably heard the news about this, or maybe not. I know a lot of people, at least my age, kind of put our heads in the sand and try not to listen to news, which may or may not be the best strategy. But if you are someone that consumes news at all, you've probably heard of a NAR lawsuit. This is a class action lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors from home sellers. So there are a couple of lawsuits that have settled for $418 million that are changing the way that real estate commissions are structured moving forward. In the past, it was pretty common practice for sellers to sign a listing agreement with an agent saying that they will pay their listing agent X number of dollars, or usually X percent, and then they'll also pay a buyer's agent Y percent. That was kind of across the board, very typical. Then that listing would go in MLS, and a buyer's agent could get on MLS and look and see these sellers are offering compensation of Y percent to a buyer's agent. What this lawsuit says is that was not fair. Whether you agree with it or not, moving forward, they've said that is not to be common practice anymore. Commissions no longer will be advertised in MLS. It is becoming 100% negotiable. That means if you are a home buyer, you are now negotiating with your agent from the jump, which kind of has always been true, but it definitely wasn't happening because most sellers were offering commission anyways. So now when you're looking to buy a house and you're interviewing buyer's agents, you especially need to ask them, what is your commission and how does it get paid? I'll get to the tips and tricks on how to get that commission paid in just a little bit, but first I want to dive into a couple of other things that have changed with this lawsuit. One of which is now before you can even see a house at all, you have to have a buyer's agency agreement signed with your agent. When you sign that buyer's agency agreement, there's a few things that are kind of the key terms. One is where this applies. Does it apply to one specific address, one city, the entire metro area? That's one component. Another component is how long this agreement is good for. Is it good for 1 day? Is it good for 3 months? Is it good for 6 months? That's another piece. The last piece is what the compensation is. Is it a percentage of the sale price or is it a flat fee? Flat fee commission has been kind of not a real common thing in the past, and I am already seeing it pop up more around Kansas City specifically. This may be something you want to consider. There may be some great packages out there, but I think in most cases, when you see a flat fee commission, that means they're going to be also reducing services that you receive with it. So I would be wary of any agents that have this big flashy marketing promoting flat fee commissions, because typically you need income to run a business. So if they're making the bare minimum on it, you have to ask, how are you running a business in the way that you can best serve me in this huge financial transaction? You can still visit open houses. Typically, the agents hosting open houses work for the seller. So they are a listing agent. So you don't have to sign a buyer's agency agreement with someone if you just walk into an open house. Do be aware that if that agent does represent the seller, anything you just say or disclose in there, they owe fiduciary duties to the seller. So if you say, hey, we are so desperate to buy this house because our mom lives next door, that could harm your ability to negotiate, because then that agent can take it to the seller. So that's another case for having an agent in your corner that you have negotiated a buyer's agency with that you feel comfortable with, so that you have representation in the transaction as well. If commission is no longer shown in the MLS, you may be wondering, how will I know if my agent can get paid on a listing? And there's a few ways. One is old school, pick up the phone and call. And truthfully, your agent should be calling a listing agent before every showing, no matter what. I always call the listing agent before I show a house to my buyers, because there are important things that we need to know before we look at the house. Is there some issue that the sellers are working to repair? Why are they moving? Is it vacant? Is it staged? Is there furniture in there? Are they still living there? What is the seller's motivation? What is their ideal timeline? These are all questions a good buyer's agent should be asking anyways. And now, because it's not listed in the MLS, another question is, are these sellers willing to pay buyer agent commission? What I suspect is going to happen is all of this is just going to become a part of negotiations when you submit an offer. I think most sellers will say, well, sure, we'll consider it. It depends on the offer and it depends on the timing, but we'll look at any offer that comes across the table. And if that's the case, then as a buyer, you just have to be strategic on how you structure your offer. In many cases, there's a maximum amount of seller concessions that they can pay. But that doesn't apply to buyer agent's commission. So the seller concessions would be like if you're asking them to pay some of your closing costs. So what this might look like is if you're putting a minimum 3% down payment down and you're doing a conventional loan, typically the max the seller can pay is 3% of the sale price towards your closing costs. So if you need help with closing costs, you can still ask for that, and you can ask for your agent's commission, whatever percent or flat fee it may be. Then the sellers can come back to you and say, well, we'll pay one but not the other, and that opens up negotiations. Some strategies to try to get your realtor's commission paid by the sellers. Number one, focus on listings that are not hot on the market, fresh first day, and going to get multiple offers. This is something that, just like if you have normal closing costs that you need paid, you have to be strategic on what kind of listings you're going after. Number two is great communication between your buyer's agent and the listing agent. They will be able to work together to try to figure out something that makes sense for both parties. And number three is understand what your buyer's agency agreement says. Typically, when you sign that, the agreement is saying that you will be responsible for this commission at the end of the day. So if you can't get the seller to pay for it, how are you going to come up with the money to pay for it? And do you even want to? If you are a buyer that simply cannot pay a buyer's agent's commission, or doesn't want to pay a buyer's agent's commission, but does want to have representation in your corner, you can make the choice to not look at listings that aren't offering compensation whatsoever. And you also have the right to walk away from negotiations at any point if your financial needs are not being met. One word of caution is I think we're going to see a lot of buyers going to open houses or going to houses and trying to work with the listing agent directly. As I mentioned previously, that agent represents the seller and their fiduciary duties. They can enter into something called dual agency on one side of the state line. In fact, dual agency is actually completely illegal in Kansas. While it's allowed in Missouri, my company, ReeceNichols, has decided that we don't think it's possible to fully represent two parties in a transaction. So as a ReeceNichols agent, we're not even allowed to. Personally, I love that policy. I would not do it even if we were allowed to. I don't think it's possible. So be very aware of what kind of agency you're entering into if you are going straight to an agent that's listing a house. I think that all of this is going to impact first-time home buyers the most. If you have a house to sell, you probably have some equity to play with to be able to pay a real estate agent. And the higher price ranges right now in Kansas City still aren't selling quite as fast and with quite as many offers and as much demand as the lower, more first-time home buyer priced houses. So if you are a first-time home buyer and it is simply not possible for you to come up with more money to pay your agent, which most first-time home buyers are just kind of skating in by the hair of their chinny chin chin because they fought so hard to save up enough money to buy their house, there's still options for you. You can look into down payment assistance programs because then you can rechannel your funds that you are going to use for a down payment into commission as like a plan C if you need to. There's also some lenders out there that offer first-time home buyer incentives that can help offset your closing costs, which again frees up more cash to be able to pay an agent if you need to and wish to. So don't fret too much. There are options out there, and if you have a good team in your corner, they will walk you through every step of the way and hopefully make this as low stress as possible, get you the best representation that you can have, and get you into a home as soon as possible. If you have any questions about this, I would love to sit down and chat. There's a link in the description at the bottom to book a time with me on Zoom, or even better, I love grabbing coffee and meeting up with people around town. Until then, I'll be here on YouTube giving you the scoop on all things Kansas City. See you next time.